Okay, so I did a talk. Hasn't gone up yet at the time of me recording this, but I was talking about how we're not the body, we're not the emotions, we're not the mind, right? And I think that we're probably not the soul either, right? So I was going through that, and then something kind of spurred this on, but I was thinking about well, we kind of like, I recently watched a video talking about, I was going to do this as a separate talk, but maybe I'll include a little bit of it here. But like single cellular life and even molecules can kind of learn behavior, right? So it kind of seems like the body formed, right, and slowly evolved over time. And we can see traces of that lineage, our lineage, right? Going back through time, right? And so eventually, the body evolves into multicellular life, right? We evolve into animals, apes, right? And then we start to develop emotions, right? So we start to get emotions. I want to say emotions developed before the mind did. And by that, I mean like we most likely were able to communicate ideas and concepts and things like that, like things like fear and things like that, that developed before we were able to think, oh, I can make tools, right? So things along those lines, things that were more complex, like the creation of tools and things like that, I would say that's the development of the mind, right? Whereas the development of emotions is things like fear and anger and things like that, right? So my argument is that definitely came before the mind really became complex, in my opinion, right? So the emotions formed, right, and those slowly evolved over time, and that led into the ability for the mind to develop, right? And then we had the mind, which allowed us to think abstractly, right? We're no longer thinking in just pure reality here, right? We're not just thinking about what is, we're thinking about what could be, right? And so the mind evolved, right? And slowly grew into what we are today, right? And maybe even a bit beyond that, right? And so I think we're getting to a point now where it's getting to that time where the soul must start evolving, right? That's the next stage in our evolution, is the soul. And that goes with consciousness and the whole understanding that is, right? And so what I think pretty much happens is I ended up with 7 here. So I think that's, I don't know if that's definitely how this has to work, right? Or I'm just kind of wishful trying to make it into the 7-day, thing here, because 7 days is such a big thing for us, the number 7. So I've got 7 steps in the cycle here, right? Well, actually, it's really more like 8. However, I don't know, right? So first, nothing existed, right? Absolutely nothing. Then something emerged, right? You could call that the Big Bang, whatever, right? Then something dispersed, right? So the something was formed, right? It was all in one spot, and then it spread out everywhere, right? So whatever was the initial thing, right? Everything that exists now comes from that. It is a part of that, right? So what's happening now is that basically there was nothing, something emerged, that something, spread out across the entire universe, right? And then, right, it learns, right? It goes out, it learns, it develops, it understands things, right? And then it brings it all back, right? And now we're in the process of consolidating that information, right? We're gathering the information, we're consolidating it, and we're realizing ourselves. We're learning, we're growing, right? Because we are a part of this universe, right? Because this universe all comes from a source, in theory, right? And so we are a part of that. And so we are just doing the work. We are learning for the sake of this one thing, right? In theory, right? In theory. So, that disperses, right? And then since everything disperses, then things start to form. This is the building of the body, right? The body starts to form, right? This starts as, subatomic particles consolidating, right? And then it those, consolidate into atoms, right? Or proton, or atoms. And then the atoms consolidate into larger atoms, and then they consolidate into, molecules and larger objects, and everything kind of consolidates, right? And so everything consolidates, all that happens, right? And then we end up with the body evolving to a point where it's somewhat self-aware of its existence, right? It's trying to keep itself alive now, right? And so we have single cellular life. This then turns into, more and more complex life. And as the life gets more and more complex, emotions also, in my opinion, get more and more complex. Then the mind starts to develop and gets more and more complex, right? And then the soul develops, right? And gets more and more complex. And then you come to this point of reconsolidation. And when the soul is at its peak, peak consolidation, right? That's when basically it gives birth to, we give birth to another round of the cycle, and it all repeats again, right? Because we become the something in the nothing. Right? When the soul reconsolidates and realizes itself, right, it then becomes the something in the nothing, because there's nothing here. There is nothing. We are in nothing. There is nothing. There's always been nothing. Nothing. None of this is anything. Not really. It's just as much something as it's nothing. Like, it's only real because we think we're real. like I know that sounds crazy, but it's just the reality of it. Like, this is nothing. We are in nothing. If you zoom in, you can keep zooming in, and there's just more nothing, right? And you can look out, and there's just more nothing. There's nothing. There's nothing, right? Well, there's something, sure, but there's just as much something as there's nothing, right? I know that I'm gonna move on. Right, but the thing is when we finally consolidate, we realize, right, the soul consolidates down. It then becomes the something in the nothing. It realizes itself as the something, and upon that realization, right, it then expands back out, right, and repeats the cycle over again. Why? Because once you self-realize, right, you're like, okay, I'm here now, right? I am the something in the nothing. Well, let's make something else, right? I'm here. Let's make more, right? Right? In the creation story, it's let there be light, right? And God's just saying, let there be this and let there be this, right? And it was good. And it was good, right? And then God creates us and rests, right? And now we are in the process of becoming like God, right? And then upon becoming like God, we then basically repeat the process, and we say, oh, well, let's create life of our own, right? And there's a bit of hubris with this, right? Because we are already trying to, and we are going to try and create life before we have actually reached the point where we should. And this is part of the hubris. This is part of the process, right? And if you look back in history, I think that there is, like, you can literally see it in the mythology and like ancient Greece and like other ancient stories, right? But there's the Titans, and the Titans are born, and the Titans like try and overthrow their like parents, right? And then the Titans have kids, and then the kids try to overthrow them, right? And it's like this repeated process, right? This is known to us. This is known to us because we see it happen all the time, right? Every kid thinks that they know best until they realize that maybe they don't, right? It's just part of the development process, right? And so we are on track to make this mistake. And in a sense, it's a mistake, but it's a necessary one, unfortunately, right? So we're going to have to kind of suffer through our mistakes. However, that's what we have to do. And I think that we can definitely do a better job. It could be uglier or it could be prettier, right? However, that's up to us and how far along we get before we actually do this. It seems like we're really jumping the gun before we're ready here. So it's probably going to be ugly. And I mean, everyone thinks it's going to be ugly. So if that's not a sign of, hey, maybe like we're not ready for this, right? But I just kind of wanted to put that out there that, this kind of evolutionary cycle, like, when you look at it from this perspective, like everything that exists is related to us, is our relative to some extent. This isn't just all life on Earth. This isn't just all humans, right, or whatever. No, I'm talking about like everything, all the matter, all the everything, just everything. To some extent is a part of us, right? It may not be directly us, but we have a connection to it to some extent. It may be very thin, a very thin line, that's a very thin thread that's like tying it together. However, it's there, right? And I don't know, I think that's cool. To me, that's cool. Some people might call me crazy. I guess to each their own. So yeah, I just want to talk about that because I kind of had that come up after I talked about that. So I wanted to just bring that up again. So peace out.